Yes.
All right, so I'm here to talk about Build a Better Book, and it's turns out to be play a very significant role in the way how my research career was shaping up to my 10-year promotion. So it's definitely the word that very dear to my heart, and I really love this opportunity to share this work with you folks today. And so it's 12 o'clock Pacific time. And then, so it's probably nice and sunny outside. Is that right? And why are we all trapped inside in this, doing this seminar? So I would like to lead off by encourage you to join me doing a little mental exercise. That imagine yourself, imagine that you are outside and sustaining the field. And then there's this really, then you see this really tall tree that got up in front of you about 100 yards. And then just imagine how tall the tree is. And imagine the color of the leaf. Now imagine yourself taking a few steps toward the tree, and one step at a time. And then all of a sudden that you feel that, oh, it's pretty cool, and because you are under the shade, and the shade of the leaves has been shielding you away from the sun, and you get really close to the tree, and you reach out your arm, and you're touching the tree, and you're trying to feel the texture of the bark with your fingers, and try to imagine the sensation. What a wonderful tree. Now imagine now you give the tree a really big hug. So this is a mental exercise that really can help us get outside. And then you all are really intelligent people with creativity, and you've been engaged in this multidisciplinary designing for people initiative. And I believe that that imagination is full of rich experiences, and there's imagery that you probably feel that you're really out there. And so I'm wondering what that, if I would like to access the image, the imagination, the world and experience that you just kind of created in your head, how can I have the access to that that's locked in your head? And one way is for you to take out a piece of paper and some painting tool. You can actually paint a picture and trying to share that imagery with me. So I will have access to, oh, what that tree might look like in your head, and what is the experience of hugging a tree is like. And another way of sharing that imagery could be, you could actually build a picture. You could take out a few pieces of paper, some plastic material, and a piece of a fabric, and try to piece together to actually construct and build a tree. And this tree is actually tangible and 3D. And I'm like to argue that this is actually a better way, a better picture compared to the one that I showed you previously, because especially for people who cannot see, I'm talking about children who are born blind or who became blind afterward. They have children with visual impairment. And for that experience of a tree that was when it was rendered and represented on a 2D surface, and it was like infinitely remote for them. But this tangible picture, a picture that like this, all of a sudden the remote experience became something accessible because they can actually touch with their hand, and they can, and so the trees suddenly become intimately close and accessible to them. And so I want to follow up with a Chinese lesson. You probably do not expect to receive one now. So it's a Chinese proverb. One generation plants the trees, in whose shade another generation rests. So I will focus on the about two group of people. in Chinese is called 前人种树,后人乘凉. 前人 means the previous generation. And you might recognize the second character in each line is actually referred to people. And 后人 means the younger generation. And so one generation plants the trees in whose shade another generation rests. And I'm really curious about behavior like that. There's like two group of people, and there are people who build stuff, like planting trees, like writing a book, like painting pictures, or even building software and designing interactive toys. And they like to build those for another group of people who tend to be younger, and in this case, it's children. And you like to do that so that it's actually better instead of worse. So children should be better off, like the shade providing some, like the tree providing shade for people who are younger than you. And I'm really curious as a researcher that is this like if I will describe as a template that guide various research activity in my lab. This is it. This is a template that I'm curious about when people building, designing something, and for younger people. And why do they do that? What is the process like to actually do that? How can they do that successfully? What are some of the reasons they might fail to deliver what they would like to do? What are some of the intended consequences? So my research like to kind of unpack what in those question marks. What are the factors that might influence the way people like you and me, like older people with more skills, design skill, or technical skill, in designing and building stuff, which is X, denoted as X. And today, my focus will, the focus of this talk today, and I would like to focus on X equals children's book. And children, I would like to focus on children with visual impairment. And for children with impairment, there's actually a lack of research. As you know, both pictures, drone product design, software developed, have not been really designed for this particular group of children. And they are designed with the assumption that children can actually see, and children can use this sight as a mode of perception and also understanding, making sense of the world. But when sight is not available, when the media is focused too much on sight, and that experience becomes largely inaccessible to this particular group of children. And for these children, because there's lack of research, a lot of common sense, a lot of intuition, assumptions about children, that when we approach to design and engineering of product and things that for them, this assumption might no longer hold. And so, for instance, have you ever, so when I invited you earlier to imagine there's a tree in the field, and I'll like to wonder that how you actually draw a tree. So how does a child draw a tree? As a child, how did you have experience drawing a tree? And if you look at these two figures, which figure is the one most likely represent the tree you drew? So I will probably imagine that since I'm not really there in the room to interact with you, so you're probably thinking about the tree to the left. But for a child with visual impairment, and some of them actually would draw a tree like the one in the right, a circle. Why do you think that is the case? Why would they draw a circle? A lot of, so
they touch and then hug the tree like this?
If you really follow the exercise we did earlier, that just like don't share now there might be a connection that the way that would like to share the experience, their mental representation of the tree, it could be a circle for this particular group of kids. And they like to share that experience. For tree, to them, what's more important is something they can hug, not something they actually just see from afar, because they can't really see it. The way they experience tree is very different. So with that, how do we factor this sort of observation and understanding about blind children that into the way that we design, we build things for them? And so that this is a research project, and it became a research project, and really spent a lot of effort, energy over the past few years, several years, to unpack what is actually in that yellow highlighted box, unpack what those are, those question marks, and was led by two PhD students who now both have graduated, and one was in University of Washington as a postdoc with a CI fellowship, Computing Innovation Fellow, and Jim is at Texas A&M as assistant professor. And we studied with those two are my first two PhD students when I joined the University of Colorado Boulder. And I'm glad that this project, not only that we actually make some significant progress in unpacking the scientific knowledge in the box, but also help them launch their respective research career. And over the years, we had the opportunity to work with local organization. And first of all, the Anchor Center for Blind Children located in Denver, and also Colorado Center for the Blind in Littleton, Colorado. And all pretty close to us. So we make like numerous trips to there and to work with them on this project. And then well, also I appreciate that Extension Science Foundation provided me with the early faculty career award that supported this work throughout these years. So that's one thing I need to acknowledge. And research question, going back to the research. So research question really, what are the factors? What is that in the yellow box that would influence the way that people build better X? And today, again, X is gonna be books, accessible books. And I would like to start with theory. And designing better X is actually engaged. There is a highly demanding cognitive process, and it requires a lot of thinking. Now, I was looking for theory to actually could explain why the reason that the way that people build better X. And then so I came across this theory from David Perkins, and it's about a deposition. It's a series of depositions. There are three depositions that could influence the way people engage in deliberate high-level cognitive process. And there are capacity, means I can build better book, or motivation. Not only I can, but also I want to do it. And I want to not just do it because just like according to my own view of the world, but do it with empathy that I can understand others and building better book for them, not just based on what I think they need, but really what they think they want and what they feel they will be better for them. And so these are the three boxes in this theoretical framework but I have to admit that this picture wasn't like that when I started my career. So I have much more limited view of what the theory behind building better products and artifacts for children. So in fact then also coming on the method. So the kind of research I do is human-computer interaction, and it's not something new to this audience. But sometimes when I present this work, I will need to explain. So human-centered, human-computer interaction research, it usually involves elements about understanding the user, number one, how people use computers to interact with other humans. And then with that understanding, you could take out engineering endeavor to create better ways for these people to interact with other people by computers. And then at the end, in my opinion, it's also important you have this understanding, you have these tools in the lab, but we need to go out and educate people about these ways, those better ways which is created, and also share the understanding about how people interact with them. And so it's like a three-step process or an iterative process. Again, my method and many of you share the same methodology. Will like to understand people better. We like to create. Then with that, we create better technologies, and so we can educate people better. And so, step one, I would like to understand people better. And so, I started with a much more limited view of this phenomenon of building better X, and And so probably we study, so probably must be the training I received when I was in, so when Dong Wook was introducing me, or alluding to my early experience of visual interface. We're doing a lot of computer vision, this technical stuff. I was trained engineer. And so naturally, when I approach this issue of why children, blind children, do not have adequate access to accessible learning material. And flip side of that question is that why people are not designing and making enough of this accessible or better material for them. So I focus on capacity, probably because it's difficult for them to do. So I focus on capacity. And if we can increase the capacity somehow, and people could actually build better stuff. And so to increase the capacity, we simply provide them with a better tool. I can build tool. I'm the tool maker. Can develop a new web-based tool, whatever it takes. And it was the thought that is not just something that I dreamed up, but it was proved by Professor Richard Lanner, one of my mentors in this project. And he very early, much in 2005, and he studied to tackle this issue about build a better book, but then specifically for textbooks. So there's a lot of textbook and lots of charts in the textbook. They were not accessible. There are a lot of graphics. And so he demonstrated that it's possible to use technology to increase the capacity of teachers and parents to actually build better textbook, but translating those. Basically, he was able to show that algorithm can be used to automate the process of transcribing graphics, which are 2D, into a 3D tangible form. And it was technology. It can automate the process. It used to be very labor intensive. Took a long time for a teacher to transcribe the graphic, a bar chart and line chart and so on into accessible tactile graphics. And so if this idea of technology increasing capacity can work for textbook, and in my particular problem, children's books, maybe they probably will be applicable as well. And so, and again, my step one is understanding people. So, and I think that maybe people are not making enough of these accessible books because of capacity issues. So I want to go around to actually validate that and trying to get information about the technical problem and issues people actually encounter. So capacity and technology, how are parents and teachers using tactile pictures and learning media for children who are visually impaired? What kind of capacity they have in terms of making those? And technology, what kind of technology they might like to explore that could change the process, improve the process, they actually create tactile learning materials. So again, technology, capacity are the first two boxes I'm trying to unpack. And then I would like to do so. So I also learned the hard way that you can go around saying that, hey, at the time, the most exciting technology is 3D printing. So I would go talk to the parents who's visual impaired, kids with visual impairment, and say, oh, do you think 3D printing will be pretty cool to actually help you make tactile pictures? And they would usually say, either they say, what is 3D printing? Can you explain to me what it is? Or they're just being polite, say yes. So it's very little they can actually learn by just going and ask them. They would like to make you happy and tell you the answer what you want. So instead, we decided maybe we should bring some design pro, like some very, very early prototype that we came up with from the lab. And so they could have something tangible in their hand to provide some feedback. And so I want to start with one book. So we started with a book that I look around. I remember at the time, my first child was just really young, and I look around the bedroom. So which book should I start? And I saw, I got like 3 copies of Goodnight Moons in my bookshelf, and that was gifted to me by many dear friends and family members. It must be the coincidence that I was gifted Goodnight Moon to us. It's a very classic children's book and bedtime story. There's a big green room. There's a telephone, there's a red balloon, and there are two pictures. There's a mouse in the room running around, and it's a cat playing with the mittens and so on. So we work hard and trying to make our best effort and following some design guideline we could find, we can learn by reading literature and trying to put together what it's like to have a 3D, what's like to actually build and construct a tangible book using 3D software and actually print it out using a 3D printer. And then we brought this early prototype to local center, Anchor Center for Blind Children to receive some feedback to hear what the teachers and parents there think. And then we were quite fortunate at that time, get some media attention. And then as a result, we received requests from various parts of the world. And we decided to get into the mail order to become the Amazon's competitor by sending out a whole bunch of different prototypes to various parts of the world. And the result is that we got a very, very good data that to help us really understand the capacity issues people might encounter as they're trying to work hard trying to provide their children with better material. And with observation, so we have observation notes from local visit, about 15 visits to the Anchor Center for Blind Children, and also receive feedback from 28 parents and teachers around the world. And so with that, and we work there's a lot of findings from that early study that set the tone for this work. I want to highlight 3 of them here. So responsibility, we found that so why are they doing this? Why do they want to do this? Because they feel like there's a responsibility, like this quote, to help a child develop their curiosity about their environment and to hone, establish, and direct their sense of touch. So there's their responsibility as parents and children that they want to provide this accessible learning material for them. And capacity, there's definitely a capacity issues that would verify that I find it easy to make tactile vocabulary books, but nearly impossible to create a tactile fiction story with a plot. Help. So there's a capacity problem that we could potentially address. And there's time issue. Often the school settings are too hectic, there isn't enough time to do anything extra. And such as, well, creating some extra children's book for the children who are blind. And so, and there are some other studies, but then this is something that I will highlight. So capacity issue, there's time, responsibility. So I think this, at the time we thought maybe that it's the problem worth solving. And from what we're hearing from the parents and teachers, then that we need to do something about it. And so, and I wonder, so at this point, is there any question for the audience about the really kind of like the way, the origin story of this whole project so far? Dongwook, is there any question I should take now, or let's keep going?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
I think, yeah, we can go ahead.
Understanding people better. And the step 2, then we have this understanding. And designing for people, we always start with understanding. We don't want to just jump ahead and create stuff without talking to people first. And so now, second step, we want to create better technology. And going back to the theory diagram, technology increase capacity. Therefore, we would like to see whether we could improve technology with the intention that capacity could be improved, so more people can build better book. And so, and then if we would like to dig even further, what is in this blue box? What should go into this technology so could achieve what we want? And Michel Resnick actually proposed that there are 3 desired properties, and he is the inventor of Scratch, and is one of the most popular graph and block-based programming that it definitely has proven to be a better programming tool for children. And low floor, high ceilings, and wide walls. Low floor, easy for people to just start, very low floor to get in. And but you can do more than just tour example. There's a high ceiling for things you can actually achieve. and they can do difficult things as well, not just easy things. And wide wall means that you can do not just one thing, and you can also do other things. So with these three properties in mind, was trying to look for as a way that we could, as a metric for us to assess that whether the technological solution that we developed would really lead to the increase in capacity. So let's start with low floors. What a different way to lower the floors. And one, so inspired by the successful example of Richard Lanner in his tactile textbook project, and then they looked at the automation of the line chart, bar charts on those mathematical graphics. And so with a computer vision background training under my belt at the time, I thought, well, perhaps we can take pictures that are more complex than tactile, bar chart and pie chart. And so I started to test these ideas even before we started with the take picture book. And I still spend some time, looking at the textbook. There are some more complex graphic that wasn't covered by Richard's work, and such as this cellular form and some other volcano. And we did a lot of prototype on different sort of other complex graphics. Perhaps there's a way we can automate using computer vision, such as this, in the process like this, where we are given an input image, that we could do some very simple feature extraction, a set of polygons from them, and then we could create this 2.5D build an elevation map. And if we could represent different component and different layer, perhaps there's a way you can touch them. And so this following a very similar process, a teacher for visually impaired, a TVI or a tactile graphics specialist might do. This follow the same process of manually identifying salient features and translate into 2.5D textual form. So we're trying to see whether we can automate that with a computer program. And with that, and it would generate Openscad code. So Openscad is this 3D modeling, programmatic 3D modeling software that you could write some code to define a 3D shape that can be sent to the printer. And so this is actually a very tiny font you're not meant to be able to read, but this is something that our program can output with following the automatic image analysis process. And it'll give you something like this, a set of polygons, a set of points that define a polygon. So you can see these numbers. A polygon is a set of points. And this polygon represents a particular shape, particular component in this on this cellular, on this picture of a cell. And then with the polygons of 2D, and to turn 2D into 3D, and you will use this process called extrusion. So there's a line set linear extrusion that you could basically run. Imagine you drag a polygon, which is 2D, across a 3D space, and you give it a volume. Kind of like, have you ever played this bubble and with the wire frame, and you run that a little loop like frame, and you run this through the space and create like a 3D structure. And lastly, there's a translation to actually translate that 3D structure you just get into a particular location in a scene. So that you have lots of these little pieces of code that our program was able to generate, and they will construct a 3D 2.5D structure like this. And step 3, it got to 3D printed, sent to the 3D printer. It's a very early model of the 3D printer when we work on this project. So they would send it to that, and we got this one of the first 3D prints that it played a very significant role in our journey. So we were able to demonstrate that process on the technical side. Automation could play some role in this. And then another way to actually lower the ceiling, lower the floor and also raise the ceiling and widen the wall is we probably also was thinking about, so that is on them. And one of the limitation of automation with some AI is now we all know very well there's some explainability issue. There's very little human can actually like provides an input. Once the AI is done, then if we want to change what AI has or understand what AI has did, and it's quite difficult because there isn't a really straightforward representation. So how can we actually find a better representation? What do I really mean? Let's use the example to illustrate. So with Openscad code, and so again, we see there's another example I'd like to share with you. So this is a scene from another really popular book. It's a hero with his purple crayon. So it's a scene with a monster sitting behind, hidden behind a tree, and with apples on the tree. And so if we look at the code, so like 3 lines, you have no idea what this actually means, even though it leads you to this particular tree. And then and sometimes parents and teachers, they like to customize a particular thing and say, oh, well, and they actually understand the kids better. They will say the apple, maybe the number of apples is too high. Maybe we should have fewer apples, 3 instead of 10. Or maybe the thickness of the apple is too short. Maybe we need a thicker apple so the kids can actually feel the difference with their fingers. And so if we ask the parent to say, hey, do you want to make some changes for us so they can get this customized for your kids? And they probably will just give up. And because it's hard to actually do anything with Openscad once you have the Openscad code, only the person who produced it can understand. It's very difficult for others to actually change it. And so we spent some time trying to work on the better representation, and it came out with a way that to model after like web 2.0 standard with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, some of this web representation, the set of programming paradigm that somehow he sit in the middle of that is not super complex, but also very powerful to represent a wide range of information. And they were successful in representing information on the web. I thought we thought that this kind of paradigm could be applied to representing pictures, 3D pictures, and representing 3D scenes and so on. And so with low floor property, and then so previously you saw that's really hard to understand Openscad code. And with a new representation using our programming new paradigm called CraftML, and the same thing now is representing as this. There's a tree. There's a range. In this tree there's a column which is a way that you arrange things in vertically on the 2D space as a column, CLL, and there's apple, and repeat this 10 times, and there's a trunk object right below. And so that the thing can be reorganized in this way. And now if we ask the parents, if you would like to add more apples, and that usually based on experience, they know immediately where in the code to go and change it. But then and later on we talk about that we could also make it easier. They don't have to touch the code at all. But for this case, I think we made pretty good progress that we're able to reduce the complexity of Openscad code into something actually readable. Another advantage of this is about accessibility. If you actually would like to read this code to a child with a visual impairment, they can actually understand as well. So it's very textual. As it is text-based, the representation has an advantage of that work very well with a screen reader. And so this is a beta. So later on, we're gonna have a beta. I have a more deep, comprehensive demo to give you a sense what this language is capable of. And so another property of this about high ceiling. So it show me a really simple example. Can this be used for really complex stuff? And so there's some examples which demonstrate that we can also do some as a computer scientist. I'm pretty proud that we can apply this to computational structure like this fractals, 3D fractals, and they're very difficult to do in Openscad, but it's very easily expressible. So I wouldn't want to I wouldn't want to bore you with the source code, but this was, if you look at the source code, it's a lot more straightforward to interpret what really goes, what is really going on with these structures. And I also saw evidence that people applying this to other sort of structures like buildings, landmark that represent different landmark in the world. And there's a CN Tower right there for Canadian audience, and then also other assistive devices like the doorknob lever and better can opener and cup holder and the lever to help open the can. So with at that point, we think we might have landed on the better technology. And so when I go around, and so it's time to move on to the third step in my HCI research method. Now we want to educate people about that is how they could make accessible graphics for children, and also teach them these technologies and various 3D modeling technology as well. So our approach at the time is that maybe we could just go around and organize some community workshop. But so the idea was really new, and we didn't quite know who would be interested in taking this workshop. And definitely as earlier, I showed you example of sending out pictures over the world. It was very labor intensive. It's only few of us in the lab, only so much we can do. So we thought we educate people better. Maybe there are more people who will be willing. Now, before maybe they didn't want to do it, but now because there's lack of capacity. Then with better tool, now maybe they can do it now, and then more people want to do it. So we started to go around and organize community workshop, and again, we didn't know who would participate, so we did a kind of smoke test, just try everywhere and send emails to different constituents around around our community, and see who would take up this offer and participate in the workshop. So it turns out the responses, we have pretty good responses in various places, even in places we did not really expect that would show any interest. And so we did it in the libraries, in the maker spaces, and in museums and various places where then they were takers of our offer to run a workshop. And there we teach them 3D modeling tool, not just our tool, but also some GUI-based tools as well, and teach about 3D printings and some of the concept of transcribing pictures into tactile and accessible form. And so we're really surprised. So definitely we have our tools, also other tools that could help with the capacity issues. But with this unexpectedly high uptake of this workshop, we thought maybe there's something else rather than capacity, and they would like to participate in building a better book initiative. To this initiative that we started to encourage them to actually join us. Maybe more than just tool. Do you think it's just a tool? Because of the tool, they came to the workshop. I think maybe more than that. So there's more than just that blue box I can. There's something else. So at the time, I also have a fortune to participate in this collaborative research across multiple universities to study citizen science. Citizen science is a phenomenon that ordinary people like you and me who are not science, who are not biologists or some other sort of specialized scientists who can also participate in a science project, like collecting data about biodiversity and so on. So in that project, we look at motivation. Why people would be motivated to participate in citizen science project? Well, what could influence their motivation? So motivation was a big thing there. And then one day I realized that, well, we're just wondering why people even came to our workshop on the Build a Better Books project site. And then so maybe there's some motivation factor we can actually consider that it's hard to imagine they all came here for the same reason. Maybe there are a variety of reasons. They probably have a variety of reasons that they actually want to do this. We can't just assume because they are better tool, that's cool and fancy, they want to do it. But there are more motivation. So and so what does it mean? And it means that we have to go all the way back to step one. And is HCI, which is really it's an iterative process. It goes through various cycles. It goes through multiple cycles. So we went back to understanding people. Now we want to understand with a slightly updated theoretical view of this phenomenon. There's a motivation we need to look at. And so we formulated a research question based on the fact that we've been running all these different workshops with different stakeholder groups. So our research question, the top three are, we want to understand distinct stakeholders. What distinct stakeholder groups are interested and willing to contribute to developing 3D printable tactile pictures? And how and what do they, why and what do they contribute? What do they bring to the table? And motivation, how do these groups differ and how do they have in common in terms of motivation? Do they have some shared common value? That's why they do this, or they are also have their own internal hidden agenda. We don't know what those are at the time. And capacity, do they all pretty technical, or do they have some kind of specific skills some of the group might not have? They will be impossible. They are all the same. So these are three major research questions. We actually went in trying to study this workshop participant with a view to unpack what must be in a second box in our theoretical framework, motivation. So I would like to just briefly mention there are select 6 participant group to discuss today. They are TVIs, teacher for visually impaired, and access librarian, the librarian who are responsible for providing accessible, mostly Braille books to patrons who have visual impairment, and children's librarian. When you go to local library, that they are the ones sitting behind the desk in the children's section, and library volunteers and also designers and engineers. That's 6 different groups we're going to discuss today. And those are 6 workshops, and we data from 67 participants. We specifically we took field notes, and then we look at the product they actually designed, the various accessible books and pictures they actually designed, and we did interview. And we found that indeed there were different motivations. For TVIs, they care about education. And for access librarian, they have a lot more experience with audio books and Braille, so they care about that, adding audio. And children's librarian, they care about literacy. Does the story actually tell the story? Do those representation, do these pictures preserve the original intent of the author? And library volunteers just want to do services, and designers, they like the 3D design part. They start designing 3D pictures for blind children, present a new challenge for them. And engineering, we just like the 3D printing, 3D printers, like they tinker them and found a new purpose of using technology in a good way. So with that, now a slightly better understanding of the various motivation and various constituent and stakeholder groups that could join so it's become much richer space rather than just 2 of my students and myself sitting in the lab. There's much richer space with people in all walks of life, and that could potentially contribute to this effort of build a better book for children. And now, how can we coordinate all these people? And so we go back again to our second step. Maybe now we can trying to build better technology. And so then we spend considerable amount of effort and to design and develop an online collaboration platform for people to share and people to work together in this endeavor to create accessible 3D printable books. And so this is our prototype, a fully functional prototype that's being actually used in production. And that for us. So in this particular example, I'm going to share with you an original book that we made from scratch, that a student was tasked to design a book about Noah's Ark, and we picked this book to avoid any conceivable copyright issue. And because this is the story that happened thousands of years ago. And it's a student who is actually a designer, then he's our computer science program, but she is really interested in design. And so she designed this book based on her best ability to interpret the scene. And she's able to write little code to do that. But then she doesn't quite know anything about how blind children learn. So that's what the teachers and parents should know that very well. And so there's an online library for people to share. But then for the parents and teachers that actually know the children well could come in to actually start to customize it. Maybe 10 raindrop is too many, you can change to a fewer raindrop. Maybe the size of the raindrop is, or the area of the picture is not big enough, they could increase the size, and that's all specified as parameters. And someone else could actually clone the picture like this, and then you have that, but then and someone else could actually jump in saying that, hey, well, I think I need a fewer piece of cloud, or I could replace the cloud with a star. And so this is an online collaborative platform for people to then for engineer, they could actually come in to help grab the models and help actually 3D print them. And for volunteer, they could help us distribute and send it to the blind children. And children librarian can comment on the story and saying that, so for instance, one of the feedback they provide with us is that some story need to, the language of the story a little bit too complex for kids with a particular age, given their reading ability. And with the TVI, they will tell us that, well, it would be important to have a key, a figure that show all the important keys. For instance, the sun and the cloud and the boat, and then so you be in the middle of the screen. So this is an extra figure that she was able to add based on the feedback from the TVIs. So this is a tool, and then we'll go around to educate people better with that tool as well. So again, study with our numbers to 2 students in my lab, and we realized that so perhaps that we could teach them even earlier. So if these graduate students that never really learned about this until they became graduate students, but if it's possible that we study to motivate people to design and learn about building better products and artifacts for children. So how early can we begin educating people about this issue, this importance of designing things for people with certain sort of different abilities? So in collaboration with CU Science Discovery, which is our university's STEM education outfit, and we've been a workshop with these younger kids. And earlier, the first set of workshop, we all targeted adults, but now we started to push the boundary. Can we go even younger? And we started a workshop, quite successful. And then with this workshop, we show the students were able to develop capacity and motivation to build better books, the capacity in using various pieces of not just 3D printing, various pieces maker technology, not just 3D printers, but also electronics and other things. In this case, makey. And they had motivation, they're highly motivated to build better books. Some are drawn because they are motivated by doing some artwork. Some really just drawn to have a volunteer spirit to help children. But as we're doing a bit more of this workshop with the children, we also now realize something was actually missing. There's more than capacity for motivation. And at the time we didn't quite articulate. We weren't able to articulate what we are still missing there. We could definitely provide the tool. We teach them how can use the tool, so we increase the capacity. Also, we're trying to offer various entry points. The people are motivated indifferently, and so they want to build better book. But then it's also more than that. What is it? So I'm about to wrap up with this.
Quick thing.
Yeah.
I want to just give a quick heads up about the time.
Okay.
The talk can end around 1 p.m. Better a little earlier so we can get at least one question. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah. Usually I was able to wrap up the talk in an hour in person. I don't know why this. Maybe I apologize. When I finish this, we realized that we've been teaching children to build better stuff. It's like teaching them to draw trees and planting trees that will be better for children. But then it turns out a lot of people just draw trees like this instead of this. So last missing piece at that, then we finally realized is that we need ways for them to think about their perspectives. You need to have empathy to understand others. So capacity, motivation, empathy. That empathy is the last final piece they complete this puzzle. So kids, as they cannot just like learn tools, but they also need to understand that there's a different perspective. So there will be the one that complete the missing puzzles. So then when we study to scale out the workshop, so we have studied to share work in different places and grow a workshop across the US, different states. And then finally, so in summary, that I showed that I will have with the HCI work, understand and create and educate, and then we eventually unpack the three things: empathy, capacity, motivation, influence people to build better books. And I would like to end by asking, so when is the best time to plant trees? Do you think it's winter or summer? The best time is 20 years ago, but second best time actually now. So as I would like to usually encourage students that when you think about you design the software, making something important, it actually might have impact to the children. That might take years to materialize. So if we could think about empathy, capacity, motivation, that could really help us in this endeavor. And thank you for today's presentation. So I will hope there's still time for some questions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the awesome talk, Tom.